My name is Clara Hayes. For as long as I can remember, the world has spoken to me not in words, but in colors and lines. I'm an illustrator, a quiet weaver of tales for children, creating worlds where friendly bears have tea parties and timid rabbits learn to be brave. My studio, a small sunroom at the back of our house in Crestwood, is my sanctuary. It overlooks a garden of unruly lavender and steadfast pines, their needles catching the soft, silver light of the Pacific Northwest. The air here smells of damp earth and coming rain, a scent that has always felt like home. 3 years ago, I married Julian. He is an architect, a man who builds strength and beauty into the world, much like he has built it into my life. We met not through some cinematic twist of fate, but in the quiet aisles of a second-hand bookstore, both reaching for the same worn copy of a book on landscape poetry. His hands were steady and sure, his smile gentle. He saw the ink stains on my fingers and didn't just ask what I did, but what I dreamed of creating. Julian is my anchor, the calm harbor to my often drifting boat. He understands the silences, the long hours I spend lost in a watercolor wash, and celebrates the completion of a single page as if it were a monument. Our life is a tapestry woven with simple threads, the warmth of coffee in the morning, the sound of his pencil sketching at the drafting table while I paint, the shared comfort of a life built on mutual respect and a deep, unspoken understanding. Into this peaceful existence came his younger brother, Reese. He was the vibrant, unexpected thread of scarlet that made the whole tapestry richer. Where Julian was the sturdy oak, Reese was the graceful willow, bending with a disarming charm. He was an urban planner, a designer of cityscapes, and he spoke of parks and public spaces with a passion that was infectious. From the moment we met, he welcomed me not as a sister-in-law, but as a long-lost friend. My initial anxieties about fitting into Julian's family dissolved under the warmth of his easy grin and genuine kindness. He became a fixture in our lives, a welcome guest for weekend dinners. "Clara, this is incredible," he'd say, savoring a bite of my roasted chicken. "You put a little bit of magic in everything you cook." He was a wonderful cook himself and would often take over our kitchen, teaching me the secret to a perfect risotto, his hands moving with an artist's precision. My brother got the cooking talent, Julian would laugh, leaning against the counter. "It's just a different kind of architecture, Julian," Reese would reply, winking at me. "And it's a pleasure to build something delicious with my favorite sister." We were a trio. We explored the city's hidden corners, hiked through trails shrouded in mist, and spent rainy afternoons at the cinema. Reese had an almost uncanny ability to sense my moods. If I was quiet, he'd draw me out with a gentle question about my latest project. If I was tired, a cup of my favorite Earl Grey tea would appear in my hands as if by magic. He never felt like a third wheel. He was the bridge between us, strengthening our bond. "He's such a good man, Julian," I'd say, watching Reese from the window as he left after an evening together. "He is," Julian would agree, wrapping his arms around me. "He's always had a big heart." "I'm so glad he loves you as much as I do." Reese's work was fascinating. He saw the city as a living organism, and his insights often sparked ideas for the little towns in my own stories. He was my biggest champion other than Julian. He'd study my illustrations, his gaze intense and focused. "You have a way of capturing light, Clara," he once said, his voice soft. "It's like you paint not just what you see, but what you feel." Coming from someone so attuned to aesthetics and design, his praise was a balm to my often insecure artist's soul. Those days felt like a sun-drenched photograph, a time of perfect, uncomplicated happiness. I remember one afternoon, the three of us curled up in the living room, a documentary about deep-sea life murmuring from the television. Julian's arm was a warm, heavy weight around my shoulders, and Reese was sprawled on the Persian rug, his head pillowed on a cushion. The soft rain tapped a gentle rhythm on the roof. "We're a strange and wonderful little tribe, aren't we?" Reese had said, looking up at us, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Julian and I had laughed, and I had felt a surge of profound gratitude. He was right. We were a tribe, bound by affection and choice, a family I wouldn't have dared to dream of. I felt safe, cherished, and utterly, completely at peace. The first shift was as subtle as the turning of a season. A new project had Reese transferring to a municipal office in the Hawthorne district, a mere 10-minute drive from our home. The old brick building was nestled amongst cafes and independent shops, a part of the city I often frequented for inspiration or meetings. "That's wonderful, Reese," I'd said when he told us the news. "You'll be so close." He'd smiled, a light in his eyes that I took for simple pleasure. "I know. Now I can keep a better eye on my favorite sister. If you ever need a rescue from a rogue squirrel in the garden, I'm your man." The first chance encounter happened a week later. I was leaving a small cafe, my portfolio tucked under my arm after a promising meeting with a new publisher. As I pushed the door open, a cool autumn breeze carrying the scent of roasted coffee, I saw him walking down the street. "Clara, what are the odds?" His face lit up with a look of pure, delighted surprise. "Was that a meeting? How did it go?" "It went well, I think," I'd replied, warmed by his immediate interest. "What are you doing over here?" "Just finished a site survey a block away. Fate must have wanted us to have coffee." He gestured back toward the cafe I'd just left. "My treat. It's my lucky day running into you." We sat for an hour, the conversation flowing easily from his urban renewal projects to the characters in my new book. As an urban planner, he had a unique perspective that was surprisingly helpful. "You're creating a community in your book, Clara," he said, leaning forward earnestly. "The way you place the badger's burrow near the stream, it's about access and flow. You're a natural planner." His words made me feel seen in a way that was new and validating. While Julian was my emotional bedrock, Reese spoke my creative language. After that, his visits became more frequent. He'd appear at my studio door in the middle of the afternoon, always with a small offering. I was just passing by, he'd say, holding out a bag of artisanal chocolates or a set of rare Japanese ink pens. "I saw these and thought of you." I was touched by his thoughtfulness, the way he seemed to have memorized my every preference. "How do you always know exactly what I'll love?" I asked him once as he presented me with a pot of a specific, hard-to-find violet I'd admired months ago. He gave a small, almost shy smile. "I pay attention, Clara. It's important to me that you're happy." His presence was a welcome break in my solitary workday. He'd make tea, offer to scan my finished watercolors, or simply sit quietly and read while I worked. At the same time, Julian's work was entering a demanding phase. He had been chosen as the lead architect for a new community arts center, a prestigious project that consumed his days and often his nights. He'd come home late, his face etched with fatigue, his mind still tracing blueprints and load-bearing walls. "I'm sorry, Clara," he'd murmur, kissing my forehead. "I feel like I'm barely here these days." "It's okay," I'd soothe him. "I know how much this means to you. And Reese stops by a lot, so I'm never lonely." A wave of relief would wash over Julian's face. "Thank God for Reese. I owe him so much for looking after you for me." Reese often used that exact phrase, for Julian. When my car battery died, he was there in 20 minutes, jumper cables in hand. "Julian would never forgive me if I let you get stranded." When I needed to ship a large, framed piece to a gallery, he built a custom crate for it. "I'll be your hands while my brother is busy building the future," he'd say with a gallant half-bow. His devotion felt like an extension of Julian's love, a safety net woven by the two brothers to catch me. I felt cocooned in their care. He began to ask more detailed questions about my life, my routines. Where did I buy my art supplies? Which parks did I walk in for inspiration? What were my usual meeting spots with clients? I saw it as the natural curiosity of a caring family member. "I just worry about you, Clara," he explained one afternoon, his expression serious. "Working for yourself, you're often alone. I like to have a general idea of where you are, just in case." It made sense. In a world that could feel isolating for a freelancer, having someone who cared enough to worry was a comfort. He seemed to have an internal clock tuned to my life. If I was out later than usual, a text would pop up. "Everything okay? Just checking in." It felt protective, not intrusive. On weekends, when a bone-weary Julian just wanted to collapse on the sofa, Reese would often rescue me from my own restlessness. "Let's let the master builder rest," he'd propose. "How about that new exhibit at the art museum?" My treat. "I'm glad you're going with Reese," Julian would say from the couch, his eyes already half closed. He'll take good care of you. He's the most responsible guy I know. And he did. When we were out, Reese was the perfect gentleman. He'd walk on the traffic side of the pavement, carry my portfolio without being asked, and always anticipate when I needed a rest or a coffee. At restaurants, he'd order for both of us, always remembering my favorites. It's only natural to spoil my brother's wife, he'd say, waving away my attempts to pay. You're the best thing that's ever happened to our family, Clara. His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I'd heard stories of difficult in-laws, of family friction and jealousy. My reality felt like a fairy tale in comparison. I had a loving husband and a brother-in-law who cherished me as his own. It's almost like having two husbands, but without any of the drawbacks, I joked to my best friend, Maya, over lunch one day. She'd smiled, a little wistfully. Hold on to that, Clara. What you three have is rare. It's like you were all meant to find each other. I smiled back, my heart full. She was right. It felt like destiny. A perfect, harmonious constellation of three people who loved and supported each other completely. I had no reason to believe otherwise. It was a Saturday in late October, one of those glorious, crisp days when the autumn sun slants low, turning the maple leaves to fire. Julian's project had finally hit a major milestone, and he had cleared his entire weekend, a rare and precious gift. Just you and me, he'd said at breakfast, his eyes bright with a freedom I hadn't seen in months. No work, no calls. Let's go to the Bridgewater Market. We can get some fresh seafood, look at the craft stalls, and just be us. A real date, I'd said, my heart lifting. It's been so long. The market was a riot of sound, color, and life. The air was thick with the smells of salty brine from the fishmongers, sweet caramel corn, and earthy chrysanthemums from the flower stalls. We walked hand in hand, two anonymous people in a bustling crowd, and it felt wonderful. We bought a loaf of still-warm sourdough bread, sampled artisanal cheeses, and I found a beautiful, hand-thrown ceramic mug glazed in the color of a stormy sea. It's beautiful, I said, cradling it in my hands. Like you, Julian said, kissing the top of my head. Let's find you a dress for the gallery opening next month. We wandered into a small, elegant boutique tucked away in a quieter part of the market. I picked out a deep emerald green dress, the fabric soft as moss. As I headed towards the fitting room, Julian leaned against a rack of silk scarves, watching me with that familiar, loving smile. And then, his smile vanished. His body went rigid, his gaze fixed on something over my shoulder. I saw his focus shift, a flicker of disbelief hardening into something else, something cold and sharp. Julian? What is it? He didn't answer. He was looking at a reflection in a large mirror on the far wall. I turned, following his line of sight. Half hidden behind a display of leather handbags, pretending to examine a wallet, was Reese. My heart did a strange little stutter step. Reese? Here? He was supposed to be at a city planning conference across the state all weekend. He had told us so himself on Wednesday. He wasn't looking at the wallets. His eyes, intense and unblinking, were fixed on us. On me. He was tracking our movements with a quiet, predatory stillness that was utterly alien. The friendly, open Reese I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger with a chillingly focused gaze. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into my veins. Julian's hand shot out and grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly firm. Clara. Come here. What's wrong? I whispered, my voice barely audible. I wanted to try this on. He didn't look at me. His eyes were still locked on Reese, who was now subtly moving, trying to keep us in his line of sight as we moved. Get in the fitting room. Now. The tone of his voice was low, urgent, a sound I had never heard from him before. It was the voice of a man facing an immediate threat. Confusion warred with a rising tide of fear. Julian, what are you talking about? Just do it. He pulled me, almost pushing me, toward the heavy velvet curtain of the nearest fitting room. I stumbled inside the small, mirrored space, my mind reeling. Julian, what is happening? He slipped in behind me, pulling the curtain shut, plunging us into cramped semi-darkness. He put a finger to his lips. Be quiet, he breathed, his voice tight. Look through the gap in the curtain. Over by the scarves. My hands were trembling as I parted the heavy fabric a fraction of an inch. My breath hitched. Reese was moving through the store, his steps slow and deliberate. He was searching. His head swept from side to side, his brow furrowed in concentration. He stopped, his gaze lingering on the row of fitting rooms on our fitting room. The expression on his face wasn't one of friendly concern. It was one of intense, frustrated possession, like a man who had momentarily lost sight of something that belonged to him. Is that Reese? The words felt like sand in my mouth. Yes, Julian's voice was a low, bitter rasp beside my ear. I knew it. What does this mean? Why is he here? I was grasping for any logical explanation. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe the conference ended early. Clara, look at him, Julian said, his voice hard. Does that look like a coincidence to you? I looked again. Reese's movements were methodical, almost reptilian. He was pretending to browse, picking up a scarf and letting it fall through his fingers, but his eyes never stopped scanning, never stopped hunting. He was watching us. The word echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence of my mind. He's been watching us, I whispered, the realization landing like a stone in my stomach. Since we got here, Julian confirmed, his voice grim. Maybe longer. Reese was now speaking to a sales assistant, gesturing vaguely in our direction. He was asking about us. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was surveillance. I don't understand, I pleaded, turning to Julian. The loving husband I knew was gone, replaced by a grim-faced protector, his jaw set like stone. That's Reese. Our Reese. We have to get out of here, he said, ignoring my plea. We'll wait until he leaves the store. Don't make a sound. We stood in that tiny, airless box, holding our breath, my beautiful green dress forgotten on its hook. I could hear the frantic drumming of my own heart. Time stretched and warped. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Through the crack in the curtain, I watched Reese pace the store, his frustration growing more visible. Finally, with one last, sweeping glare towards the fitting rooms, he turned and walked out. We waited another 5 minutes, the silence in the fitting room deafening. I think he's gone, Julian finally said, his voice strained. He took my hand. His was cold as ice. We slipped out of the fitting room and hurried out of the boutique, leaving the emerald dress behind. Back in the car, the silence was heavier than any words could be. The vibrant colors of the market seemed muted, the cheerful noise a distant memory. I stared out at the familiar streets of Crestwood, but they looked alien now, tainted by what I had seen. Julian, I finally managed, my voice shaking. Did you know? Did you suspect something? He kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He let out a long, shuddering breath. I've had a feeling, he admitted, the words sounding like they were being torn from him. For a few months now. I didn't want to believe it. He's my brother, Clara. A feeling about what? Things didn't add up, he said, his voice heavy with self-recrimination. The way he was always just passing by. The way he knew your schedule better than I did. I asked him about it once, and he just laughed it off, said he was being a good brother. I told myself I was being paranoid, jealous even. My mind raced, replaying months of interactions, reframing them in this new, horrifying light. The thoughtful gifts. The concerned questions. The uncanny timing. Every instance of his kindness now felt sinister, each a carefully placed stone in a path leading to this moment. He took so many pictures of you, Julian continued, his voice cracking. At family dinners, on our hikes. I thought he was just proud, happy for us. But the way he looked at you through the lens, it wasn't right. It was hungry. It wasn't a brother's affection. It was an obsession. By the time we reached our house, the sun had set, and a deep chill had settled over me that had nothing to do with the autumn air. The home that had been my sanctuary now felt fragile, its walls suddenly too thin. We sat in the living room, the comforting space now charged with a terrible new energy. I didn't want to see it, Julian said, his head in his hands. I couldn't let myself believe my own brother could be capable of this. I didn't want to destroy our family. But the family I had cherished, the perfect, happy trio, had already been destroyed. It had been an illusion, a beautiful, carefully constructed lie. And I had been living in the center of it, utterly blind. That night, sleep was a distant country I couldn't reach. I lay awake in the dark, Julian's arms wrapped tightly around me, and for the first time in our home, I felt truly, deeply afraid. The next day was a Sunday, gray and washed out, the sky weeping a slow, steady drizzle that matched the mood inside our home. The silence was a living thing, thick with unspoken fears. After a sleepless night, Julian came to a decision, his face pale but resolute. "We have to know," he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "We're going to his apartment." "Julian, we can't just—" "Clara, after yesterday, we have to," he interrupted, his eyes pleading with me to understand. "I need to know what we're dealing with. I need to know how to protect you." Reese had told us he wouldn't be back from his conference until late that evening. Julian still had the spare key Reese had given him years ago, for emergencies. This, I thought with a sickening lurch, was an emergency. The drive to Reese's apartment in the Pearl District was surreal. The building was modern and sleek, all glass and steel, a testament to the clean, ordered life he supposedly lived. Inside, the apartment was immaculate. The furniture was minimalist, the books on the shelves were arranged by color, and there wasn't a speck of dust in sight. It was the home of a man in complete control. We searched the main living area and kitchen first, finding nothing more than the ordinary possessions of a young professional. A growing, desperate part of me began to hope we were wrong, that yesterday was a bizarre, inexplicable anomaly. Then Julian went into the bedroom. He was quiet for a long moment before he called my name. His voice was strained, thin. "Clara, you need to see this." In the back of the walk-in closet, behind a row of neatly pressed suits, was a large, sealed archival box. It was labeled simply, "Projects." Julian pried it open. The breath left my body in a single, silent gasp. It was a shrine. To me. There were hundreds of photographs, most of them taken without my knowledge. Me, laughing with Maya at a cafe, shot from across the street with a long lens. Me, in our garden, hanging laundry, my face relaxed and unaware. Me, walking by the river, lost in thought. They were intimate, secret moments he had stolen. Underneath the photos was a series of leather-bound journals. Julian opened the topmost one. His hands began to shake. It was a meticulous log of my life. My comings and goings, the clothes I wore, the people I met, the duration of my phone calls. He had recorded it all in his neat, precise handwriting. It was a surveillance diary. "He's been following me," I whispered, nausea rising in my throat. "For months." But the worst was yet to come. In a small, lacquered box, we found things he had collected. A silk scarf I thought I'd lost. A single silver earring that had vanished from my jewelry box. A half-used tube of my favorite rose-scented hand cream, taken from my purse. And, wrapped in tissue paper, a lock of my hair, tied with a red ribbon. A wave of violations so profound washed over me that I had to grip the edge of the dresser to stay upright. This was a sickness. Then Julian found the final journal, the one buried at the very bottom. It wasn't a log. It was a diary. A narrative of his twisted love. "She is wasted on him," the entry began. "Julian sees a wife, a partner. He doesn't see the light she carries. I see it. She is a rare bird, and he keeps her in a comfortable cage. She looks at me in a way she never looks at him. A flash of understanding. A shared soul. She knows, on some level, that we are the ones who are meant to be. He is the obstacle. But I am patient. I will show her the truth. I will build a world for her so perfect that she will have no choice but to step into it. She will be mine." The words were a delusional fantasy, a story he had written to justify his obsession. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. I had not been a sister to him. I had been a character in his script, a prize to be won. Suddenly, we heard the sound of a key in the front door. My blood turned to ice. He was back. Early. "Clara?" "Julian." Reese's voice, cheerful and light, drifted in from the entryway. "My conference ended a day early. What a nice surprise, too." He appeared in the bedroom doorway. He took in the scene in an instant. The open box, the scattered photos, the journal in my trembling hands. His friendly mask didn't just slip, it shattered. The warmth in his eyes was replaced by a flat, cold emptiness. "You read it," he said. It wasn't a question. "Reese, what is this?" Julian's voice was a low growl, vibrating with a fury I had never witnessed. "It's the truth," Reese said, his voice eerily calm. "No more pretending." "You're sick," Julian choked out. "She's my wife." A flicker of something contempt, pity, crossed Reese's face. "She deserves more than you, brother. Clara wants me. She just hasn't admitted it to herself yet." "That's not true." I finally found my voice, backing away until my shoulders hit the wall. "Reese, I thought you were family. I loved you like a brother. Don't lie to me." The calm facade cracked, and for the first time, I heard the raw madness beneath. He took a step into the room. "The way you smiled at me. The way you'd listen when I talked about my work. You never looked at Julian like that. You were choosing me every day in 100 small ways. Just admit it." "Reese, face reality," Julian said, moving to stand between us. "Clara loves me. She was kind to you because that's who she is. You twisted her kindness into something it was never meant to be." "Shut up." Reese lunged, not at Julian, but towards me. "You always get everything. Ever since we were kids. Mom, the praise, the easy life. You take and you take and you take. But not her. Clara is mine." Julian was shocked into stillness for a second. "Mom? What are you talking about?" "Mom left us." "She left both of us." Tears, hot and furious, welled in Reese's eyes, but they held no sadness, only a terrifying, warped rage. "She left me. She took you for weekends, for holidays. I was the one left behind with Dad and his bitterness. I was the one she abandoned. Because you were the good one. The one who deserved love." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "So this time, I get what I deserve. I get the best thing. I get Clara." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about me. This was 30 years of resentment, of a wound left to fester in the dark heart of a boy who felt abandoned. I was just the weapon he had chosen for his revenge. "I'm calling the police," Julian said, his voice shaking as he pulled out his phone. "No." Reese's composure finally broke completely. He looked at me, his face a mask of desperate appeal. "Clara, tell him. Tell him you understand. I did all this for you. For us." "This isn't love, Reese," I said, the words tasting like ash. "This is a sickness. You need help." His face crumpled, the last shred of his fantasy world turning to dust. "Even you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I thought you would be the one to see me." As Julian spoke to the 911 dispatcher, Reese sank to the floor, not in remorse, but in the frustrated despair of a child whose intricate game has been kicked over. The police arrived, and the rest of the evening was a blur of flashing lights, sober voices, and the formal language of restraining orders and mandatory psychological evaluation. As two officers led him away, Reese turned and looked back, his eyes finding mine one last time. There was no apology in them. Only a chilling, unwavering promise. "This isn't over, Clara. You'll see. Someday you'll understand." I collapsed into Julian's arms, shaking uncontrollably. The family I had loved, the life I had thought was a masterpiece of warmth and light, had been nothing more than a carefully rendered illusion, and its creator had just been led away, leaving me alone in the ruins. 3 months passed, but time did little to sand down the sharp edges of the trauma. We obtained a permanent restraining order. Reese was committed to a therapeutic facility, diagnosed with a complex blend of erotomania and attachment disorders rooted in his childhood. But these clinical terms were cold comfort. They couldn't erase the memory of his eyes, the feeling of being watched, or the violation of having my life catalogued and curated like a collection of specimens. Crestwood, the city I loved, now felt haunted. Every familiar street corner held a potential ghost. We decided to leave. It was the only way to breathe again. We sold our house, the home where we had been so happy and then so terrified, and packed our lives into boxes. We chose a small, quiet town on the Oregon coast, a place called Seaglass Bay, where the land met the sea in a constant, soothing roar. "Are we running away?" I asked Julian one night, surrounded by cardboard boxes filled with the fragments of our old life. He stopped taping a box and came to sit beside me on the floor. He took my hands in his. "We're not running away, Clara. We're running towards something new. Towards peace. He needs to heal, and so do we. We can't do that here." Our new home was a small cottage, weathered gray by the salt spray, with windows that looked out onto the vast, churning expanse of the Pacific. A gnarled cypress tree stood guard in the small yard. I set up my new studio in a room facing the ocean, and the shifting colors of the water, from stormy slate to brilliant turquoise, began to seep into my work. Julian found a position with a small, local architectural firm that valued his thoughtful, human-centric designs. We were consciously, deliberately, building a new life, a smaller, quieter one, just for the two of us. But the past has long arms. Letters from Reese began to arrive, forwarded from the facility. Julian tried to hide them from me, but I found the small stack in his desk drawer. The words were couched in the language of therapy and remorse, but underneath, the obsession pulsed, alive and unchanged. "I am working every day to understand the pain I caused. But my feelings for you were the most real thing in my life. A love like that doesn't just disappear. I know one day you will see the truth of it." Julian burned them in the fireplace, the ashes swirling up the chimney like dark prayers. 6 months after our move, on a raw March morning, Julian's phone rang. It was the facility. Reese had walked out during a group recreational activity. He was gone. Julian's face went white. He told me it was a routine update, that everything was fine, but I saw the terror in his eyes. He called the local police, installed new locks, and for the next few days, he never let me out of his sight. An invisible siege had begun. "Julian, what is it?" I asked him that night, as he stood staring out the window into the black, windswept darkness. "Tell me the truth." Before he could answer, a motion sensor light in the backyard flickered on, flooding the small patio with stark, white light. And there, standing just at the edge of the darkness where our yard met the wild dunes, was a figure. It was Reese. He was thinner, his hair longer, but his stance was the same. He was just standing there, watching the house, his face a pale oval in the gloom. He was waiting. My heart stopped. He had found us. Julian was already on the phone with the police, his voice a low, steady report of the situation. We watched from the window, frozen, as Reese took a single, hesitant step towards the house. It felt like an eternity, but it was only 10 minutes before the blue and red lights of a patrol car sliced through the darkness, racing down our quiet coastal lane. Reese didn't run. He just turned, a look of profound, sorrowful disappointment on his face as the officers approached him. As they put him in the car, he looked towards our window, towards me, and his voice, carried on the wind, was clear and desperate. "Clara, I just wanted to talk. I won't give up on us." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat wrapped in a blanket in Julian's arms, listening to the relentless crash of the waves on the shore. The ocean that had seemed like a symbol of healing now felt like a churning reflection of my own fear. "Will we ever be safe?" I whispered into the darkness. "I will keep you safe," Julian answered, his voice a fierce, unbreakable promise. "Whatever it takes. I will always keep you safe." The next morning, as the sun rose over the gray water, we looked at each other with a new, sober understanding. The solution wasn't another move, another town. The fortress we needed to build wasn't made of walls and locks. It had to be built inside ourselves. I look out my studio window now at that same ocean. It's been a year. Reese is in a more secure facility, and the letters have stopped. The fear has not vanished entirely. It's a phantom limb, an ache I feel on damp days or when a stranger's smile seems too kind. But it no longer owns me. I have learned that family is not a bond of blood, but a covenant of the heart. It is about who shows up, who protects, who respects the sacred space of your soul. Julian is my family. Maya, who calls every single week, is my family. The kind-eyed woman who runs the local bookstore and saves me books she thinks I'll like, she is a part of my family too. I've also learned that self-respect is a form of boundary. It is saying no to that which diminishes you, even when it wears the mask of love. My art has changed. The brave little rabbits in my stories now face shadows that have no name, and they learn not to run, but to find the light within themselves. Julian and I are quieter now, more attuned to the small, true things. Our love is not the easy, sun-drenched tapestry it once was. It has been torn and restitched. It is stronger for the scars, deeper for the darkness it has weathered together. The future is not a guarantee of safety, but an open expanse. And we walk towards it not in fear, but with a quiet, hard-won strength, hand in hand, facing the endless, unpredictable sea.